After SHTF, calories will be king. But just eating beans and rice day after day will probably only aggravate the slump that we'll already be in. So in today's video, we're going to see how easy it will be for you to learn an easy skill to make a food that will be a real treat during SHTF, right after the channel intro. Remember, you are ultimately responsible for protecting yourself and for providing for yourself. Live your life with honor and integrity, and always be the wolf hunter. Don't be the sheep, and never be the wolf. Welcome to this community. I'm an avid prepper, an oath keeper, and I'm certified to teach firearms and the use of deadly force through my state's police academy. If you want to learn true prepping skills and how to protect yourself without getting arrested, then please subscribe to this channel. Serious preppers know that prepping is more than just stockpiling stuff. That prepping should also entail learning skills that may possibly make life a little better and a little easier for us should SHTF happen. And today we're going to learn a very simple way to make homemade blueberry jam. So simple that it will be able to be easily done after the grid goes down. And as silly as that may sound for a prepping video, just remember, knowing skills like this will also make you more attractive to prepper groups if you don't already belong to one. And being able to make something like this will be a great morale booster for you and your family after SHTF happens. Now we'll be seeing exactly how to make it in just a second, but first, what I like about this recipe is that there is only 3 ingredients: blueberries, sugar, and the third ingredient is actually optional, but the third ingredient is a little lemon juice. Now I just like adding the lemon juice because you can't really taste it, but I believe that the acidity in the lemon juice helps for the finished blueberry jam to store longer, to be a little bit more shelf stable, if you will. But again, I was excited for this recipe because it only calls for the 3 ingredients: the blueberries, which I grow in my backyard, the sugar, which I have a couple of 100 pounds of in my food preps, and then the optional lemon juice. And I also like it that it doesn't have any pectin in it like most fruit jam recipes have, because after SHTF, making pectin in order to make jam may not be so feasible unless you have the extra fruits to make the pectin. And I don't know if store-bought pectin will store for 30 years like beans and rice and other dried goods will. So here's the recipe, and I'll also put it down in the description box so you can print it out. But you're going to need 6 cups of crushed blueberries, 4 cups of sugar, and the optional 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Now after me and my family ate plenty of blueberries right off of the bush this year, we only had 4 cups of blueberries left instead of the 6 cups. So instead of using 4 cups of sugar today, I just used 2 1/3 cups and only 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. But anyways, here's the instructions. If you're going to can your blueberry jam like I did, then you're going to want to prepare all of the canning stuff by first washing your canning jar lids and rings and also your canning jars. And then putting your lids and rings into a simmering pot of water that's kept hot enough that it continues to simmer while you do the rest of your prep work. Then fill your canning pot with just enough water to cover your canning jars by a couple of inches. And then turn on your heat and put your empty canning jars in that pot and let them boil for about 15 minutes to sterilize them. And then give your blueberries a quick rinsing if needed. And I was losing a lot of juice when I did this, so I made it a pretty quick rinsing. Then I put the blueberries into a saucepan and began cooking them down over a medium heat and also mashing them as they began to heat up and cook. And then once the blueberries were pretty mashed up, then I added the sugar and the lemon juice and continued to stir it until the sugar was dissolved. And then I simply just cooked it for a couple or more minutes before I checked to see if the jam had gelled enough for the proper consistency that jam should have. Now a way to check to make sure that the jam has gelled enough is to put a little bit on a plate and let it cool down to room temperature. And then once it's cooled down enough, then run your finger through that bit of jam. If it's undercooked, then the jam will run back together. But if it's gelled enough to the right consistency, then the jam will not run back together. And for time's sake, I put my little bit of test jam in the freezer to get it to room temperature quicker. And if this was during SHTF, then you would just simply blow on it to speed up the cooling process. Now remove your canning jars that you have been sterilizing in the boiling water and ladle the cooked blueberry jam into those jars. And you want to fill the jars up with enough of the jam so that you only have about a 1/4 inch headspace between the jam and the canning jar lid. Now one thing that I've learned about canning is that it is not always a super exact science. In this case, I didn't have quite enough jam to make all 3 jars to have exactly a 1/4 inch headspace in each jar. So I evenly distributed the jam across all 3 jars and had about a 1/2 inch headspace in each jar. Now, while I am comfortable with doing that, do your own research and make up your own mind if this would be safe to do or not. Now, I forgot to videotape it, but once I put the cooked jam into the canning jars, I then used a wooden skewer to run around the inside edges of the canning jars to remove any air bubbles that may be trapped down at the bottom of the jar of jam. Next, you'll want to take a damp cloth and wipe the rim of the jars to remove any jam that may have gotten on them while adding the jam. And also double check that your jar rims don't have any chips or cracks in them. Doing this helps ensure a good seal during the canning process. Next, you just put the lids onto the jars and then twist on a lid ring until it's fingertip tight. And to explain that further, the ring's only real job is to hold the canning lid in place on the jar as it goes through the canning process. During the canning process, the heat causes pressure to build up within that jar and then excess air gets pushed out. So the ring should only be tight enough to hold the lid in place, but while still letting air that's being expelled to actually slip between the rim of the jar and the lid. And then you put the canning jars into the canning pot and make sure there's about 2 inches of water covering your jars. Now your water should still be pretty hot from where you were sterilizing the jars, so once you turn the heat back on it, it shouldn't take too long for the water to come back to a boil. And you also may notice that I have several empty canning jars in the pot. And I do this because the empty jars help keep the filled jars from falling down while the water is boiling and bubbling. But once you turn the heat back on, just simply put the lid on the canning pot. And then once it comes back to a boil, then let them process in the canning pot for about 15 minutes, or whatever time is needed for your area's altitude. Then after the jam-filled jars processed in the boiling water for 15 minutes, then I simply turned off the heat, then I gave it about 5 minutes to cool down a little bit. And then after it cooled down for about 5 minutes, then I removed the jars of the blueberry jam from the canning pot and then I set them to cool for 24 hours on the countertop. Now if you listen closely, you'll hear all 3 of the jars give that pop or ping sound as soon as I place the jars on the counter. One pop already. And I'm sorry about the shoddy camera work. I was hoping to capture the lids actually popping, but they all 3 popped before I could get the angle on the camera right. But that popping noise that you're hearing are actually the jars forming a seal. So if you're canning food, that's a very pleasurable sound to hear right after you remove them from the hot water. Now it's my understanding that you don't want to disturb or handle the jars that you just canned for a full 24 hours after you've canned them, as this helps to ensure that the jars get a good seal as they're cooling down. Now after 24 hours, you can then remove the ring and check for a proper seal by picking the jar up only by the lid. And if you have a proper seal, then the lid will be suctioned tight to the jar and the lid and the jar won't separate by picking it up by the lid only. And you also don't want to store the canned foods with the lid ring on them either. If something happens during storage to cause the jar of food to lose its seal, which would then cause the food to spoil, the ring could cause a false seal, and obviously you don't want that. And then of course this would be a good time to write the date on the lid or do whatever you want to show when the food was canned if you're going to put it into your food stores. Now while I was a little disappointed that I only had enough homegrown blueberries to make only 3 of these half-pint jars, I've only got 2 blueberry bushes and one is still fairly young, so only one of the bushes really produced well this year. And I could have went to the store and bought more blueberries to use in today's video, but I kind of felt like that would have been cheating. I wanted nothing but blueberries grown in my backyard to be in this recipe and in this video. So let's see how the jam turned out. Okay, here is what it looks like several days later after I canned them. I'm a little disappointed. I only got 3 jars out of that bag of blueberries. If SHTF were to happen, I would definitely be having like growing like 20 or 30 of these instead of just the two blueberry bushes that I got. All right, let's see how the stuff looks once it's opened. Looks pretty good. What do you think, babe?
Looks good.
Okay, let's see how this stuff spreads. What do you think? How's it look?
It looks good. It gelled up well.
Especially with no pectin.
It spreads well. It's got little pieces, but not too big.
Okay, let's see how these taste. That is good. It's a little sweet, but it's pretty good.
Oh, it's good. I mean, it's jelly. It's sweet, but it's the right sweetness.
Blueberries cooked down, just sugar added to it, no pectin, no nothing else. Blueberries from our backyard.
That's actually really good.
You know what, baby? There's something that's off about you. I can't quite picture what it is. What's off about you?
I'm perfect the way I am.
I know what it is. You don't have one of these hats on.
Yeah, that must be it.
It's not fitting on your head. How come?
Because I have a ponytail.
Oh.
It's a protective measure.
Love you, baby.
I love you too.
Now, I don't know how long this stuff will store on the shelf. I don't know if this stuff will store for only about a year or if it will store for 20 or 30 years or anything like that. But I don't plan on making this stuff to store it long term anyways, at least not yet. I already have plenty of long-term storage food. For right now, this is just a skill that I'm learning and practicing so that I can add variety to my long-term storage foods if and when SHTF happens. So now I know that if SHTF happens, that I can make bread with just a few ingredients. And the link to the video showing how simple it is to make the SHTF bread and bake it in a fire pit should be appearing in the upper right corner about now. But now since I know that along with making bread, that I can also make blueberry jam, as long as I'm not in a situation where I can't let others smell my food cooking. And while I've got over 3 million calories worth of a decent variety of different dry goods that can store for about 30 years, I truly believe that learning skills like how to make jelly and bread and pasta sauce will just help offset the eventual food boredom that you and your family could develop once SHTF happens and you're forced to start actually eating your food preps. And one more quick final note of why I liked this pectin-free recipe in regards to prepping. Many times recipes for jams and jellies call for pectin to be used in the recipe to help the jam to gel up. And I just don't know if store-bought pectin will actually store for 30 years, so I don't want to have to count on it as part of my preps to be able to make jam should SHTF happen. Now I know that you can make your own pectin out of fruits and apples, but first you have to have access to those fruits and apples in order to make the pectin yourself. So unless your prepper retreat location has apple trees growing on it already, you may not be able to make your own pectin should SHTF happen. So that's just one reason I was excited about finding this pectin-free blueberry jam recipe. And I'm still learning how to make my own jam and can it. And there may be thousands of other recipes for other types of jam, such as strawberry or grape jam, that don't call for pectin. But if there are, then you're going to need to research that yourself, as I've not had the time to research it yet for myself. And one last thing, I can't say that I'm exactly excited about how much sugar that this recipe uses. This definitely won't be a daily thing that we'll be eating. It'll be eaten on special occasions or during the rare Saturday mornings that me and my family can actually enjoy a Saturday morning breakfast together. While I enjoy making these videos for pennies on the hour, I am wishing to purchase better video and editing equipment that will allow me to make better quality videos for you all without actually putting me into debt to make the videos. So if you have the disposable income, please consider joining my Patreon video channel, where for just $1 a month you'll get early access to videos and also receive special prepper and naturally made gifts from time to time and other exclusive Patreon member rewards when they become available. To help support our community, please subscribe and hit the like button. Please comment below. Please share this video on social media. And please make sure you have the bell icon hit for notifications of when videos are released. Find me on Facebook. Just type Ethical Preparedness Page in the Facebook search box. Anyways, folks, if you made it this far, hey, thank you very much for watching. And I pray that you have a good night.